How to Survive an Omegaverse Novel with Money. Part 1. The universe has a sick sense of humor. Let me tell you something about cosmic irony. It's not funny. It's the opposite of funny. It's the kind of joke that makes you want to find whatever god is in charge of reincarnation and throw hands. My name was Remy. Well, is Remy. Was Remy. Look, this is already getting confusing, and I haven't even gotten to the part where I died. Let me start over. I was born as Remy, the illegitimate son of a powerful family. My mother was a maid. A beautiful maid, apparently, because the lord of the house, my biological father, had absolutely no self-control. She died giving birth to me, which was tragic, but also meant she never had to deal with the absolute circus that was the family she'd left me with. The family kept me around for reasons that remain unclear to this day. Maybe as a cautionary tale. Maybe as a servant. Maybe they just forgot I existed half the time. They already had 3 sons. Massimo, the heir, Enzo, the businessman, and Raphael, the youngest, still 2 years older than me, who had inherited his mother's face. And what a face it was. I don't say this lightly, Raphael's mother was stunning. The kind of stunning that makes you understand why someone would risk their entire marriage and social standing. The kind of stunning that makes you go, okay, I get it now. Raphael had that same face. And he was gay. I am also gay. This was not a problem in itself. The problem was that Raphael's face, as beautiful as it was, sat atop a personality that could only be described as if a cactus and a credit card debt had a baby. He was angry, entitled, and deeply insecure, a dangerous combination in any person, but especially in one who kept dating men who would inevitably meet me and develop a wandering eye. I didn't even try to steal his boyfriends. They just looked at me. That's all it took. One glance at my face, and I am being modest here, but I was very handsome. And suddenly Raphael's boyfriends would start asking questions like, "So, who's your brother? And, does he come here often?" Raphael hated me for it. Hated me so much that he made my life a living nightmare. Trips down the stairs that weren't entirely accidents. Meals that mysteriously disappeared before I could eat them. Rumors spread around the household that I was cursed, unlucky, bad news. The only good thing the family ever did for me was send me to school. Probably because they didn't want me in the house any more than I wanted to be there. I threw myself into IT because computers don't care if you're illegitimate. Computers don't spread rumors. Computers will never push you down a flight of stairs, unless you really mess up the code, and even then, that's on you. And every week, like clockwork, I bought a lottery ticket. It was a ritual, a dream, a little piece of hope that cost me $2 and kept me sane. Every Wednesday, I'd walk to the corner store, buy the ticket, and spend the next few days imagining what I would do. When I won, the house I would buy, the family I would leave in the dust, the middle finger I would finally get to give Raphael on my way out. And then, one day it happened. I was sitting in my tiny room, more of a closet, really, but they let me call it a room, checking the numbers on my phone. And I had to check them 7 times. Then an 8th time. Then I had to check them again because surely I was hallucinating. I had won $3 million. $3 million. I stared at that ticket like it was the face of God. I think I started crying, which I'm not ashamed to admit. I was 23 years old. I had survived a childhood that bordered on psychological warfare, and I was finally going to escape. I was going to buy a house, start a business, never see Raphael's perfect, punchable face ever again. I was so happy that I ran outside to get some fresh air because I genuinely thought I might explode from joy. And that's when the car hit me. I didn't even see it coming. One moment I was on the sidewalk planning my future. The next moment I was flying through the air, thinking, "You've got to be kidding me." Then everything went black. Part 2. Surprise, you're a villain now. I woke up on my knees. This was immediately concerning because I did not remember falling asleep on my knees, and also my knees hurt, and also the floor was made of marble, and my old room didn't have marble floors. My old room didn't have floors you could describe without using the word linoleum. I blinked, looked around. I was in some kind of grand hall. Chandeliers, tall windows, the kind of place that screamed old money, in a font that cost more than my entire previous existence. Before I could process any of this, I heard a voice. Ezra. A man stood before me, and when I say man, I mean man. He was tall, like annoyingly tall, with broad shoulders, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes that were currently looking at me with the kind of disgust usually reserved for finding a hair in your soup. Dark hair, dark suit, and an aura that practically shouted, I am an alpha and I am very important. Behind him, cowering like a leaf in a hurricane, stood another guy, pale, delicate, with big innocent eyes and a bottom lip that seemed permanently stuck in a pout. He looked like he'd never lifted anything heavier than a teacup in his life. And then the memories hit. Not my memories. His memories. Ezra's memories. They flooded into my brain like someone had opened a fire hose directly into my skull. I saw a lifetime of abuse, of gaslighting, of being slowly pushed out of his own home by a father who hated him and a stepmother who wanted him dead. I saw a half-brother named Lysander, the pouting leaf behind the tall man, who smiled to everyone's face while stabbing knives into Ezra's back. I saw an engagement to the tall man. Cassius, his name was Cassius. That was crumbling because Lysander had spent years playing the victim. And I realized, with the kind of horror that only comes from recognizing a story you've read before, that I knew this plot. I had read this novel. It was some trashy Omegaverse thing I'd picked up at the airport because my flight was delayed, and the other options were a golf magazine and a book about how to manifest your dreams through crystals. I'd read it in one sitting, mostly because I had nothing better to do, and I'd spent the entire time yelling at the main character, Ezra, for being such a doormat. Ezra, in the novel, refused the money. He stayed on his knees, begging for Cassius to love him. He let Lysander destroy his life. He died alone and heartbroken, and Cassius spent the rest of his existence regretting everything, which was supposed to be romantic but actually just made me want to throw the book across the room. And now I was him. Now I was in the book. Now I was on my knees in front of Cassius, and Cassius was about to say the line. I could feel it coming. The dramatic pause. The righteous indignation. This engagement ends now, Cassius said, his voice dripping with disgust. You always hurt Lysander. He is only trying to be nice. He paused, probably for dramatic effect. I am going to give you $10 million to leave him alone and break off this engagement. $10 million. The words echoed in my brain like a choir of angels. $10 million. That was more than $3 million. That was more than my lottery ticket. That was so much more that I almost laughed out loud. In the novel, Ezra had refused. Ezra had said something noble and stupid like, I don't want your money. I want your love. And then he'd spent the rest of the story miserable and broke. Well, I wasn't Ezra. I was Remy. And Remy had just died right after winning the lottery, and Remy was not about to make the same mistake twice. I stood up so fast that both Cassius and Lysander flinched backward. Lysander actually squeaked, which was satisfying in a way I didn't have time to analyze. Deal, I said, grinning from ear to ear. Cassius blinked. Whatever he had been expecting, it was not that. His perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose about half an inch, which on his face was the equivalent of a full-body recoil. I what? He said. I said deal, I repeated, brushing off my knees. $10 million. I'll take it. Where do I sign? Behind him, Lysander's mouth dropped open. His pouty lip quivered in confusion. But you're supposed to, he's supposed to. To what? I asked, turning my grin on him. Beg? Cry? Throw myself at your boyfriend's feet and declare my undying love. I snorted. Please. $10 million can buy a lot of things, and a broken heart is not one of them. Where's the money? Cassius was staring at me like I'd just grown a second head. A head that was also doing complex math. You're agreeing? Did I stutter? I said. Write the check. Wire the transfer. Hand me a bag of cash. I don't care how you do it. Just make it happen. I held out my hand expectantly. Cassius, to his credit, recovered quickly. He pulled out his phone, made a few taps, and said, "The money will be in your account within the hour." "Pleasure doing business with you," I said. Then I turned around and walked out of the hall without looking back. Behind me, I heard Lysander start to cry. Real tears, fake sobs, the whole production, and Cassius's voice, softer now, trying to comfort him. I didn't care. I had $10 million and a second chance at life, and I was not going to waste it following some stupid plot. Part 3. How to accidentally become a genius. Step 1. Be good at computers. The first thing I did was buy a house. Not a mansion, I wasn't an idiot. A nice, modest house in a quiet neighborhood where no one knew my name and no one cared about my past. I bought it outright because the idea of paying rent made me break out in hives after a lifetime of living in a glorified closet. The second thing I did was set up an office. A real office with multiple monitors, ergonomic chairs, and a mini fridge stocked with energy drinks. Because I had a plan. In my previous life, I had been an IT student. A good one. And in this world, technology was surprisingly similar to my own. The same languages, the same systems, the same bugs that needed squashing. The only difference was that here, Omegas weren't expected to know anything about computers. They were supposed to be soft, delicate, and focused on finding an alpha to take care of them. I was none of those things. So I did what any sensible person would do. I created an anonymous online identity. No name, no face, no scent markers. Just a reputation for being the best problem solver money could hire. I called myself Nexus because it sounded cool and vaguely mysterious, and because some guy who was really good at coding was too long for a business card. The first few months were slow. I took small jobs, built a portfolio, established a network. But within 6 months, Nexus had become a legend in the tech world. Companies big and small were lining up to pay me exorbitant amounts of money to fix their problems, and I solved each one faster and more efficiently than anyone thought possible. I didn't sleep much. I didn't socialize at all. I just worked because working meant money, and money meant freedom, and freedom meant I never had to be on my knees begging for anything ever again. Then the big one came. Xavier Blackwood. His company, Blackwood Industries, was a titan. The kind of company that made other companies nervous. And Xavier himself was a legend, an alpha CEO who had built his empire from nothing, known for his ruthless business tactics and the fact that no Omega had ever successfully flirted their way into his office. He had a problem, a big one, a security breach that had locked his entire system down and was threatening to expose all his company's secrets. He reached out to Nexus. I fixed it in 2 hours. 2 hours. I wasn't even trying that hard. I was eating a sandwich with one hand and typing with the other. The security breach was clever, I'll give the hackers that, but it had a fundamental flaw that anyone with half a brain could have spotted. I plugged the hole, reversed the encryption, and sent a report back to Blackwood Industries explaining exactly what had happened and how to prevent it from happening again. I thought that would be the end of it. It was not the end of it. A week later, I got a message from Xavier Blackwood himself. Not from his assistant, not from his IT department. Him. He wanted to thank me in person. He wanted to meet the genius behind Nexus. I said no. He offered me $5 million. I said no again. I already had plenty of money, and meeting people in person was risky. What if someone recognized me? What if word got back to Cassius? What if Lysander found out and decided to make my life difficult? Xavier came back with $20 million. I said yes so fast I almost broke my keyboard, because even if I had money now, 20 million was not just another number. Part 4. The most expensive blind date in history. We met at a private restaurant. The kind of place where the waiters wore suits that cost more than my first car and the menu didn't have prices because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. I arrived early, because that's what you do when someone is paying you $20 million to show up. I wore my best clothes, which, thanks to my new fortune, were actually nice now, and I walked in like I owned the place. Xavier Blackwood was already there, to my surprise. He was sitting at a table in the back, nursing a glass of whiskey, and when he looked up and saw me, he froze. I don't mean he paused. I mean he froze. His hand stopped halfway to his mouth. His eyes went wide. For a full 3 seconds, the most powerful alpha in the city looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then he recovered because he was a professional and stood up to greet me. "Your Nexus," he said. His voice was deep, smooth, matching his handsome face and absolutely dripping with disbelief. "I am," I said, taking a seat across from him. "And you're Xavier Blackwood. Pleasure to meet you. You can put the 20 million in my usual account." He sat back down slowly, still staring at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "You're an Omega." "Last time I checked, yes." I picked up the menu and glanced at it. "Oh, they have truffle risotto. Excellent." I wasn't expecting an Omega to be good at computers. I raised an eyebrow at him. "That's a little old-fashioned, don't you think?" "The 19th century called. They want their gender roles back." Xavier blinked. Then, to my surprise, he laughed. A real laugh, not a polite business laugh. "You're not what I expected." "I get that a lot." I set down the menu. "So, you wanted to meet me. You've met me. Was it worth $20 million? "It was worth every penny," he said. And the way he looked at me when he said it made something warm curl in my stomach. "I want you to come work for me." "I already work for a lot of companies," I said. "I make a lot of money from a lot of different sources. Why would I tie myself to just one?" He leaned forward, and his eyes, dark brown, almost black, with flecks of gold in them, locked onto mine. "You wouldn't be tied to a company. You'd be tied to me." I felt my pulse skip. Just a little, barely noticeable. "I will pay you any amount you want," he continued. "Any contract you want. Any conditions you want. Name your price." I smiled. A slow, dangerous smile that I'd perfected over years of dealing with people who saw me as nothing. I stood up from my chair, walked around the table, and bent down so my mouth was right next to his ear. I could smell his cologne, something woodsy and expensive, and beneath that, the faint scent of alpha pheromones that made my Omega instincts sit up and take notice. "I'm very expensive," I murmured. "Are you sure you can afford me?" When I pulled back, Xavier's expression had shifted. The surprise was still there, but underneath it was something else. Something hungrier. "I have enough money to afford anything," he said. I laughed and walked back to my seat. "I'll think about it." But Xavier, it turned out, was not a man who accepted "I'll think about it" as an answer. He insisted on a tour of his company's headquarters the very next day. "To see what you'd be working with," he said. I agreed, mostly out of curiosity. Blackwood Tower was a monument of glass and steel, piercing the sky like a declaration of war against mediocrity. Xavier met me in the lobby himself, ignoring the stunned looks of his employees as he escorted me to the penthouse floor. His office was exactly what you'd expect. Minimalist, expensive, and cold. But his private quarters attached to the office were different. Warm. A fireplace. Bookshelves filled with actual books, not just decorative ones. He made me coffee. He remembered I took it with oat milk and a dash of cinnamon, which I had not told him. He'd had his assistant research it after our dinner. "That's either very thoughtful or very creepy," I said, taking the cup. "I prefer thorough," he said, and his smile was soft. Vulnerable, even. This was not the face of the ruthless CEO the business journals wrote about. We talked for hours, not about work, about growing up, about the feeling of never quite fitting in, about the books we loved and the places we wanted to see. When I finally glanced at my watch, it was past midnight. "I should go," I said, not meaning it. "Stay," he said, just that one word. No pressure, no expectation, just an offer. I stayed. Nothing happened that night, not in the way you're thinking. We sat on his sofa, and he put his arm around me, and I fell asleep against his shoulder. When I woke up the next morning, he had carried me to his bed and was asleep in an armchair across the room, like a dragon guarding its treasure from a respectful distance. It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done for me, so I returned the favor. A week later, I invited him to my house. My modest, quiet house with the multiple monitors and the mini fridge full of energy drinks. I cooked him dinner. I'm not a great cook, but I'm good at following a recipe, and we ate on my small porch watching the stars. Thank you, he said out of nowhere. For what? For being exactly who you are. For not trying to impress me. For the risotto, which is slightly burned but still delicious. I kicked him under the table. He laughed. And then, back in the office, something strange started happening. Xavier's assistant, a sharp-eyed beta named Marcus, began to notice things. The cold, untouchable CEO, the man who ate lesser executives for breakfast, would disappear into his private office for hours. And when Marcus would knock with urgent papers, he'd hear it. A low, soft sound, almost like humming. One day, Marcus cracked the door open without knocking. An emergency board meeting had been called, and found Xavier Blackwood leaning back in his chair, staring at his phone with the goofiest, smilliest, most un-alpha-like expression on his face. He was literally simpering. His cheeks were slightly flushed. "Mr. Blackwood?" Marcus said, stunned. Xavier's expression snapped back to ice in a nanosecond. "What?" The board meeting. It's in 5 minutes. I'll be there." But as Marcus turned to leave, he heard it again. A soft, private sigh. He glanced back. Xavier was looking at his phone again, and that sappy, love-struck smile had returned. Marcus closed the door quietly and made a mental note to send a fruit basket to whoever this Ezra person was. The man had performed a miracle. Part 5, Heat Wave. I have had bad heats before. In Ezra's memories, his heats were miserable affairs. He'd lock himself in his room, ride out the waves of pain and need alone, and emerge days later feeling like he'd been run over by a truck. This heat was different. This heat was intense. It hit me like a freight train in the middle of the night. One moment I was fine, working on a project at 2 a.m. because I had no concept of healthy sleep schedules. The next moment I was on the floor, my skin on fire, every nerve ending screaming for something I couldn't name. I managed to grab my phone and call the one person I could think of. "Ezra?" Xavier's voice was groggy. It was 2 a.m. Of course he was groggy. "What's wrong?" "Heat," I gasped. It's early. I'm on my way." He hung up. I don't remember much after that. The heat fog rolled in, thick and suffocating, and I lost myself in waves of sensation. I remember tearing at my clothes because they felt like sandpaper. I remember crawling to the bed because the floor was cold and cold was good. Cold was something. And then Xavier was there. He must have broken the door down because I heard wood splintering. Then his hands were on me, and his scent was everywhere. That woodsy, alpha smell that made my omega instincts purr with relief. "Ezra," he said, and his voice was strained, controlled. He was fighting his own instincts, I realized. Fighting the urge to just take, because that's what alphas were supposed to do during an omega's heat. But he didn't take. He held me and he waited. "Please," I whispered. "Xavier, please. Are you sure?" His eyes were dark, pupils blown wide. His hands were shaking. "Ezra, if we do this." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said. "Now stop being a gentleman and help me." That was all the permission he needed. The first time was desperate. Xavier laid me back onto the bed, his body warm and solid against mine. He kissed me deeply, almost urgently, as he settled between my legs. Everything about me was already open and ready for him. He took a moment to prepare me carefully, then pressed forward in one steady motion, filling me completely. The stretch was intense, overwhelming in the best way. He moved with raw need, deep and fast, the two of us lost in the heat and the closeness. I clung to him, gasping as pleasure built quickly. He leaned down and pressed his mouth to my neck, not quite a mark but enough to send sparks racing through me. I came first, hard, my whole body tightening around him. Xavier followed right after with a low sound, holding me tightly as he finished. But the heat wasn't done. The second time was slower, more consuming. He turned me onto my stomach, lifted my hips, and slid back into me in one smooth motion. This time he took his time, long, deliberate strokes that seemed to find every sensitive place inside me. The mess of earlier lingered between us, making every movement slick and easy. He reached around to touch me in time with his rhythm until I broke again, muffled against the pillow. Xavier groaned and came a second time, pressing close and staying there as the last waves of his release settled. We kept going until the heat finally began to fade. By the end I was limp and exhausted, my body covered in sweat and the faint marks of his hands, everything between us soft and spent. Xavier pulled me into his arms, holding me close against his chest. "I love you," he whispered into my hair. I pretended I was already asleep, but I wasn't, and I loved him too. Part 6. The Revenge Tour. The next few months were the best of my life. Xavier and I became inseparable, but we hadn't gone public. To the world, Nexus was still a ghost, and Xavier Blackwood was still the most eligible, unattainable alpha bachelor in the city. The gossip columns were obsessed. Who would finally tame the beast? Then the gala invitation arrived. It was the event of the season, hosted by the city's elite. Xavier was the guest of honor. He called me that evening, his voice lower than usual. "I need to ask you something. You sound serious. Did someone die?" "No. Worse. I have to go to this gala. And the rumors are already spreading that I've found someone. The vultures are circling. I want to put an end to it." "You want me to come as your fake date to throw them off the scent?" "I want you to come as my partner," he corrected. "And I want to present you to everyone as my lover. My real lover. Not a fake date. The real thing. If you're ready for that." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. Going public meant no more hiding. It meant my face, my name would be tied to his. It meant Cassius might see. It meant Lysander might see. It meant my awful family might see. And to be real, I felt good about it. "I'll be there," I said. "What should I wear?" "I'll have something sent over." He had a black suit tailored for me. Not just any black suit. It was woven with subtle silver threads that caught the light when I moved. Fit me like a second skin. When I walked into the ballroom on Xavier's arm, with his hand firm on the small of my back, the entire room went quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen," Xavier said. Not waiting for an introduction, he pulled me gently in front of him. "I'd like you to meet my partner, Ezra." He didn't say Ezra who. He didn't need to. The name echoed through the crowd like a gunshot. Whispers exploded. "Ezra? The disgraced son of the Ashworth family? The one Cassius Valerius broke the engagement with?" And then Xavier delivered the killing blow. "He is also the tech genius known as Nexus. The person who saved my company and a lot of other companies. And the man I love." The cameras flashed. The whispers turned into a roar. And in the corner of the room, I saw Cassius. He was staring at me, but not with regret, with confusion. And beside him, Lysander was clinging to his arm, looking absolutely stricken. But Cassius wasn't looking at Lysander. He was looking at me. Cassius still believed Lysander was the victim. He still thought I was the villain. It didn't matter. I had Xavier. His eyes went wide. His drink slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. Lysander squeaked and jumped back. But Cassius didn't even notice. He was already walking toward me. "Ezra?" he said, like he couldn't believe his eyes. "What are you? How are you?" "Enjoying the party," I said pleasantly. "Lovely canapes. You should try the lobster." "You're Nexus," he said. It wasn't a question. "You're the tech genius that Xavier's been working with. You're Nexus." Astute observation. I patted him on the shoulder. $10 million well spent, wouldn't you say? He grabbed my arm. I'm not kidding. He just reached out and grabbed me, his fingers digging into my bicep hard enough to bruise. His eyes were wild, desperate, and there was something in them that looked almost like regret. "We need to talk," he said. "I made a mistake. I shouldn't have. About everything. I know that now. And let go of me." My voice was calm, quiet, but something in it must have gotten through to him because his grip loosened. Just a little. "Ezra, please." He said let go. This time, the command came from behind me. Xavier had appeared out of nowhere, his hand closing around Cassius's wrist with enough force to make the other alpha wince. "You're hurting my mate," Xavier said, and his voice was ice. Cassius laughed. Actually laughed. "Your mate?" Ezra was so in love with me that he begged at my feet. "There's no way you're his mate." I looked at him. Really looked at him. This man who had humiliated me humiliated Ezra in front of everyone. This man who had believed Lysander's lies without question. This man who had paid me off like I was a problem to be solved, not a person to be loved. "Whatever we had," I said, "ended the day you gave me $10 million to go away. You made your choice, Cassius. Live with it." Then I turned and walked away, with Xavier's hand warm on my back, and I didn't look back. The revenge on my family came a few weeks later, and it happened precisely because I was now public. My phone rang. It was my father, then my stepmother, then my half-brother Lysander. They didn't call to apologize. They called to ask for favors. They had heard I was Nexus. They had heard I was rich and connected. They wanted introductions to Xavier's investors. They wanted money. They wanted in. I laughed at every single one of them and hung up. Furious, they tried to drag my name through the mud. They went to the press with stories about how I was a liar, a manipulator, an illegitimate wretch who had abandoned their family in their hour of need. That was their mistake, because Xavier had been helping me. Quietly, methodically, he had hired the best forensic accountants and private investigators money could buy. He had given me the resources I needed to dig into my family's past without me having to lift a finger beyond pointing the direction. We found everything. The doctored will. The payments to the private clinic where Ezra's mother had died under mysterious circumstances. The DNA test that had been falsified. Turned out I wasn't the bastard. Lysander was. His mother, the perfect, beautiful mistress, had been sleeping with another man before she married Ezra's father. Lysander was not an Ashworth at all. And the real heir, the only legitimate child of the late lady, his murdered mother, was me, Ezra. All along. I released everything. Not anonymously this time. I stood next to Xavier at a press conference and I laid it all out. The murder, the fraud, the lies. I had the documents. I had the testimony. I had the truth. The public reaction was nuclear. My father and his mistress were arrested within days. Lysander's status evaporated overnight. He wasn't just a liar anymore. He was a fraud with no name and no fortune. He was nothing. And in his desperation, Lysander made his final, fatal mistake. Cassius's company was still standing, but just barely. Lysander, frantic to prove to Cassius that he was worthy, that he was better than me, announced that he would single-handedly fix the company's failing tech division. He locked himself in Cassius's server room for 3 days. He destroyed everything. He didn't understand the systems. He tripped firewalls, corrupted backups, and accidentally released a worm that ate through the company's financial records. Cassius's company, already teetering, collapsed entirely in a single weekend. Now he was facing bankruptcy, and he came to me for help. "I know I don't deserve it," he said, standing on my doorstep like a drowned cat in an expensive coat. "I know I treated you horribly, but please, Ezra, I'm begging you." I let him beg for a while. Felt good. I'm not proud of that, but I'm also not going to pretend it didn't. Then I helped him, because I'm not a monster. And because fixing his company took me about 3 days, and 3 days was a small price to pay for the look on his face when he realized just how badly he'd messed up. "I forgive you," I told him when it was done. "But I don't want you. I have Xavier. And honestly, I always deserved better than you." He didn't argue, but with hollow eyes. "He lied," he whispered. "Lysander. He's been lying for years. About you. About everything. I didn't want to see it. I didn't say, 'I told you so.' I didn't need to." The look on his face was punishment enough. Part 7. The wedding. The wedding was not small. Xavier refused. "You've spent your whole life being hidden," he said. "You've been the secret, the scandal, the afterthought. Our wedding is going to be so big they'll write about it in history books." He wasn't exaggerating. We rented a castle. Not a ballroom. An actual castle, with towers and a moat and 1,000 twinkling lights strung through ancient oak trees. There were 500 guests. There was a 12-piece orchestra. There were 7 courses. There was a champagne tower that was taller than I was. I wore a white suit, as planned, but this one was hand-stitched with diamonds. Xavier wore deep emerald green, because he said I was the only one who got to wear white. When I walked down the aisle, alone, because my father was in prison where he belonged and I didn't need anyone to give me away, Xavier's eyes went soft in a way I'd never seen before. He looked at me like I was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. "You're crying?" I whispered when I reached him. "I'm not crying," he whispered back, even though there were definitely tears on his cheeks. "It's allergies. It's March. Seasonal allergies." I laughed and he laughed, and then we said our vows, and then we kissed, and then we were married. After the reception, after the dancing, after the cake, 3 tears, each a different flavor. After Xavier had thrown the garter directly at Cassius's face by accident, we finally retreated to the honeymoon suite. The castle tower room was lit only by candles. Rose petals covered the floor. A bottle of aged champagne sat chilling by the bed. It was straight out of a romance novel, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. But I didn't laugh, because there was something I had to do first. Xavier was loosening his tie, watching me with that soft, adoring look that still made my chest ache. "You're thinking very loudly," he said. "What is it?" I took a breath, sat down on the edge of the bed, patted the space next to me. He sat, took my hand. "Xavier," I said, "I have to tell you something, and you're going to think I'm insane. And if you want to leave after I tell you, I'll understand. But I need you to know, because I can't marry you. I can't be married to you with a lie between us." His thumb stroked over my knuckles. "There's nothing you could say that would make me leave this room." "My name isn't Ezra," I said. "Well, it is now, but it wasn't always. My name was Remy. I died. I was hit by a car. And then I woke up in Ezra's body, on his knees, in front of Cassius, the day he gave me the $10 million. Xavier didn't move, didn't blink. "I'm not from this world," I continued, the words spilling out now. "I read about this world in a book. Ezra was supposed to refuse the money and die miserable and alone. But I wasn't Ezra. I was Remy, and Remy had just won the lottery and died, before he could cash the ticket. So I took the money. I ran. I created Nexus. And then I met you." Silence. Then Xavier lifted my hand to his lips and kissed it. Gently. "Remy," he said, testing the name. "Remy. That's not the name on the marriage license," I said, my voice cracking. "It's the name of the person I fell in love with," he said. "I didn't fall in love with Ezra Ashworth. I fell in love with the man who fixed my security breach while eating a sandwich. The man who laughed at my jokes and burned my risotto and told me my gender roles belonged in the 19th century. He cupped my face in his hands. I fell in love with you, whoever you were, whoever you are. You're not freaked out?" "I'm a little freaked out," he admitted, "but not in the way you think. I'm freaked out that you thought you had to hide this from me. I'm freaked out that you carried this alone." He pressed his forehead to mine. "I don't care if you're Remy or Ezra or a sentient computer program that learned how to be human. You're my husband. You're the father of my future children. You're the only person in the world who can make me smile like an idiot in board meetings." "You do smile like an idiot," I whispered. "Marcus told you." "He didn't have to. I've seen it." He kissed me then, soft at first, then deeper. Then with a kind of desperate tenderness that made my eyes sting with tears I refused to shed. moving together in the soft glow of the candles. Rose petals stuck to our skin. I came again, trembling into the sheets. Xavier followed soon after, pressing close and staying there as the last of the intensity faded. By the time we finally collapsed together, I was a sweaty, thoroughly satisfied mess, rose petals clinging to both of us. "So," I said, staring at the ceiling, "about that $20 million you owe me." Xavier laughed so hard he nearly fell off the bed. 3 months later, I found out I was pregnant. I stared at the positive test for a full 10 minutes, convinced it was a mistake. Then I took 3 more tests. Then I went to a doctor. Then I came home and sat on the couch and stared at the wall until Xavier walked through the door. "Ezra?" He took one look at my face and immediately panicked. "What happened? Is someone dead? Do I need to kill someone?" "I'm pregnant," I said. He dropped his briefcase. "You're what?" "Pregnant," I repeated. "With a baby, a small human, growing inside my body as we speak." He stared at me. I stared at him. Then he burst into tears. "Are you happy crying or sad crying?" I asked because I genuinely couldn't tell. "I don't know," he sobbed. "Both? All of them? I'm all the crying." I laughed. I couldn't help it. And he crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me into his arms, and we stood there in the middle of our living room, holding each other and crying and laughing and crying some more. We were having a baby. 6 months later, our son was born. He was small and pink and absolutely furious about being evicted from his warm, comfortable home. He screamed like he was personally offended by the concept of oxygen. He had his father's eyes and my nose and absolutely no chill whatsoever. He was perfect. "What should we name him?" Xavier asked, cradling the baby like he was made of glass. I looked at our son. Our son, tiny and loud and already so full of life, and thought about everything that had brought me here. The lottery ticket, the car, the $10 million, the heat, the love, the revenge, the wedding, the second chance I never deserved but got anyway. "Leo," I said. "It means lion." Xavier smiled. "Leo Blackwood." "Leo Ezra Blackwood," I corrected. "I'm keeping my name. I earned it." "Leo Ezra Blackwood," he agreed. Then he leaned over and kissed me, soft and sweet, while our son grizzled in the background. And for the first time in either of my lives, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And that is where my story ends. Except not really, because Leo just threw up on my shirt, and Xavier is laughing at me, and I wouldn't trade this for $3 million or $10 million or all the money in the world. The end.